We provided a link to you all. The exposure draft was a little bit lengthy, and rather than kill a bunch of trees, we just provided you the link. I hope you all have had an opportunity to look at the exposure draft. Ours did meet last week on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Jimmy, you didn't get the word because this has all been happening very quickly, but we did not vote to issue the standard last week. That is, and we'll talk about the timeline a little bit after Chaz presents some information. We had a focus question that we sent out last year and asked boards if they had A, reviewed the exposure drafts, and B, if they had any concerns. And we did that so that we could get the feedback to make a determination of whether NASBA should consider writing a comment letter. And those focus questions were responded to by about 36% of the boards responded that they had reviewed the exposure draft. Of those, about 14 of the boards said they had no issues with the exposure draft, and 5 or 6 state boards said they did have some concerns and that they would be writing letters. And in fact, the ARS got about 55 letters on the exposure drafts. 6 boards did respond, which represented 11% of the letters that we got, and basically agreed with the ARSC's positions. They do have some concerns, and hopefully we'll be able to tell you a little bit about how we're going to try to address those concerns. One surprise to me was the number of respondents that were individuals or firms that responded that had a problem with having the client sign an engagement letter. And for you all, as we put our regulator's hat on, that is a very important document, because without the document, that was on the preparation service, I'm sorry, that they didn't feel like the client ought to have to sign the engagement letter. But that's the only sure way that as a board member, if you're sitting there, that you can know that the practitioner at least tried to convey to the client what they were doing, that they were not doing anything other than a preparation service. We had about the same number of those individuals that did not like the idea of a legend, and I know I've talked to several of you all who also have some concern about the legend. There also was a little bit of concern about the effective date. However, since ARS did not vote to approve the standards quite yet, this is going to get pushed back to August, so I think the implementation period is, although we're going to still permit early implementation, I believe, it's going to be pushed back. Chaz and I are here today too, and we're not necessarily representing 100% ARSC's views. I think that's what we're supposed to say. We are both members, well actually Chaz is not a voting member of ours. He is the chair of the Clarity Task Force, which is writing the standards for the Clarity Project. So I'm going to let Chaz talk to you now about the preparation and compilation engagements. I will cover the association and the review, and we'll briefly talk about the framework. So Chaz?
Well, good morning, everyone, and I really appreciate the invitation to come back and talk to NASBA. When I attended last year, after we had issued the exposure drafts for the proposed SARs, it made a big difference. I realized during the conversation and the question and answers, we didn't have it quite right, especially the independence part of what we were trying to do. So we went back to work on it over the last year. We think we've got we issued the exposure drafts. We received a majority of them were very positive about the preparation standard and compilation standard. And we received a number of good comments and went through every one of the comments and considered them carefully. So we're back this year with hopefully something that makes some sense for practice and makes some sense for the public interest. One of the things we've talked about at ARSC is the SARS came out in the late 1970s. There's a lot being done in the cloud. There's a lot being done through technology. And some of the things being done in the compilation and in practice just don't make sense when you're out at a client or you're not out at a client and working through the cloud and helping a client get their books right, get their general ledger right. So we felt there needed to be some vehicle in which we could be associated with financial statements and not be in an illogical position of saying we can't finish the financial statements until we get a report on it. It's just the way practice is today, and it's not something that's coming. It's something that's here and been here for a while. There's a lot being done in the cloud, and there's a lot being done by our profession through technology. So we feel the preparation service, after Peak made the change of saying preparation of financial statements is a non-attest service, ARSC feels it's important when we're associated with financial statements to say something about that. So in a tax return, a non-attest service, we don't put a report on it. Other non-attest services, we don't put a report on it. But financial statements, we feel it's important to say something about it, so we came up with the legend. And in that service, independence is not something that, as with other non-attest services, we feel needs to be added to the statement. We want that legend to be short and practical. We've talked to the software vendors, that QuickBooks, Intact, that provide a lot of the cloud-based services or technology services. It's absolutely no problem to, through technology, add that legend and change it. Comparison of the SARS compilation and preparation. Let me say, in some of the comment letters we received, we got comments, why are we even sticking with compilation? Why don't we just get rid of compilation? And it's so embedded in our profession, it's so embedded in many state board rules. ARSC considered that over the last couple years, and we feel compilation should stay. We feel the preparation service makes sense for some of the things we're doing today. So when does the standard apply? When we're engaged. So the submission model of when we're working with a client's general ledger and we would hit a point as a professional, and it's still the standard today, of talking to our client, now I've done enough on your financial statements, I need to do a compilation where we're talking a client into the fact that we have to do a compilation report because we're now submitting financial statements, will go away. It's now, I think, a more logical conversation with a client. You need to engage us to do the financial statements for a compilation. And submission was a fuzzy line. There's a lot of diversity in practice on submission, the push the button issue, but I think I certainly feel more comfortable, and I think it makes more sense, and ARSC does, to have a conversation with a client. Okay, if you want our name on the financial statements, you want us to prepare financial statements, we need to have an engagement. And then we want to have an engagement letter that the firm signs and that you sign. Same thing for preparation. Engagement letters are required. We did, as Janice said, get a number of comment letters questioning the engagement letter requirement. It was certainly brought up in the comment letters. This is a standard higher than an audit that's in the audit standards. But we feel for this type of service, where there's a lot of maybe more unsophisticated financial reporting people, it's important for practice that the firm practitioner sign the letter, the client sign the letter, and get rid of any confusion in terms of what service is being provided or if we're associated with the financial statements. Independence, compilation, it's the same as in the past or as today. We deal with it. If we lack independence, we note it in the last paragraph of the report. Preparation, no. It's a non-attest service, and that's something Peak decided. If the accountant is not independent, does it need to be disclosed? Compilation, yes. Preparation, it doesn't apply. Does the engagement require a report? Compilation, yes. Preparation, it's a legend. Financial statements go to the users outside of management, yes. So there may be some concern in preparation. We issue a financial statement. The financial statement may have no disclosures. It may have full disclosure. Each page has to have a legend on it, according to the preparation standard, that no assurance is provided. That statement can go to third parties. Over the years, I think in a lot of monthly compilations, a lot of services we do, it was just an illogical conversation to have with a client, at least I felt, so that you gave them a management use only financial statement, the old SARS 8, and you'd say you can't give this to your board, or you can't give this to outside parties. I know a lot of times in practice I would get the look from the client, and it would just be a blank look. And to try and explain, well, we've got a standard, this is just for your use. That's what you hired us for, that's what the engagement letter is. Well, they look at us to get the numbers right, make sure the financial statement is right, and I think this is an improvement in practice, though I understand there are questions with it. May the financial statements omit notes? Obviously, under both services, yes. One of the respondents in the comment letters put together a chart, and again, the comment letters, they're all online at the AICPA, were excellent, and we did look through those comment letters. But one of the respondents put together a chart of when preparation does apply and does not apply. And we looked through that, and we're still tweaking it some, and it'll be added to what ARSC is considering is adding it to the preparation standard as an exhibit or an appendix, some non-authoritative guidance, to help practitioners understand maybe when preparation applies and doesn't apply. So it applies when, if we're doing financial statements, and this happens quite a bit in practice, where one practitioner is hired to do financial statements, and another firm, maybe monthly financial statements, maybe the year-end statements, they're not independent. Another firm comes in and does the audit and review for independence. The preparation standard would apply. It does not apply in a regular audit review and compilation situation. A client does not have to hire us twice, once to prepare the financial statements and a second time to do an audit. Preparation of financial statements, if we need to do a financial statement before we do a client's tax return and we present a financial statement alongside a tax return, well then we would need to be engaged by the client to do a preparation or compilation service. If the financial statement is inside the tax return and on the tax form, it does not apply. Personal financial planning, one of the things ours talked about is we don't want to change existing standards out there. So there is an exception under personal financial planning if a financial statement is included within that, and also with litigation services. And some of the questions will come up, as they have in the past with submission. If we're doing depreciation schedules, adjusting the client's books and records, and doing a significant amount of work so that we are associated with the financial statements, it's going to come down to professional judgment on our part. When do we prepare? When do we ask the client to engage us to prepare the financial statements? Or maybe we're just going out and doing their depreciation schedules and they're finishing up their financial statements. So we felt this, this table, and again, we're working on it some, hopefully will help practitioners, and we plan to add it to the preparation standard. We had an exposure draft out on association with financial statements. This year and last year wasn't the first time ARSC has tried to get association with financial statements into some form of guidance and out to practitioners. And the clarified audit standards for the auditors, the old AU 504 on association is gone. We looked at the comment letters on association, and we looked at what we're doing on preparation and compilation, and decided to pull back our association exposure draft. So the plan of ARSC is not to issue the standard on association. We want to look at it, make it more clear in terms of when we as practitioners give a client the right to put our name in a document, say it's a franchise offering document, and there's financial statements included, what's our responsibility as practitioners? So I think the Auditing Standards Board is going to look at that a bit more, and ARSC wants to look at that a bit more too. But again, we read the comment letters on association, and we just don't feel we have that right, so we're not going to be dealing or voting on that. The review exposure draft, I think, is pretty straightforward. We received, I think, about 14 comment letters on review. Again, excellent comments. I would say the review exposure draft is a clarified review standard. So if you've done reviews in the past, there's not a big change. We just clarified it. There's not big changes within review, and I don't think there's a need to spend a lot of time on that. In terms of the proposed SARs, we issued the exposure drafts November 2012 for review. We looked at the comment letters. We're really ready to go on that. We're cleaning up a few issues. We also had an exposure draft on the framework. The framework is where we refer to the code of conduct and the ethical standards of the profession. And there was an interesting point about a year and a half ago when ARSC was dealing with what do we do with compilation and what do we do with what's going on in terms of technology today. And we spent an afternoon walking through the ethics standards and the code of conduct, and we sat back at the end of that conversation and said, we really don't need a compilation standard or preparation standard. Everything a practitioner is required to do is really in the code of conduct in terms of due care, not being able to issue financial statements that are misleading. So in our framework, we've got references to the code of conduct, and we discussed, should we expand that? Should we have a lot of guidance in our framework on the code of conduct and the ethical standards required? And we came down on just referring to the key sections of the code of conduct in doing SAR standards that you need to refer to, because as all practitioners, we should be familiar with that code of conduct. But we've talked in some of the ARSC meetings, and for those that are sports fans, an analogy, you take a football field. Where does a compilation line up on the football field? Well, it's inside the 20-yard line with the goal line on your back. You could say it's on the goal line. There's no assurance. There is no assurance provided in a compilation or preparation. But I think the code of conduct and where we're at as CPAs pushes us. We're somewhere within the 20-yard line. We need to make sure those numbers are right, and the financial statements we're associated with are going to be used appropriately by the client. We need to understand our client. We need to use our judgment in terms of what service we're going to provide. Then where's a review? And we would debate this. Is it on the 50-yard line? Is it inside the 50-yard line with limited assurance? And there's not agreement on ARSC. There's some feel a review is closer to the opponent's goal line, and there's some that feel it's on the 50, and there's some that feel in limited assurance you're not, you're on the 35 or 40-yard line with 60 yards to go. And certainly the audit, you're inside the 20-yard line going to the goal line on assurance. It's reasonable assurance. An audit can't be absolute assurance where you're inside the end zone and you've scored, but you're certainly in the red zone. So that when ARSC has talked about where does compilation fit and preparation fit, we understand we have a responsibility to public. We have a large responsibility to our clients, and we're feeling good about where we're at in terms of lining these services up with what are the needs of the clients of our profession and what is in the public interest. So I think in terms of the timeline, we met in May, and as Janice said last week, we've gone through all the comments. We're really, we feel, done with preparation, compilation, and the framework and review. We're pulling back the association standard. We're already started since our meeting last week in making final changes, exchanging emails. The task force is setting up a call to finalize these standards. The ARSC intends to vote these out final in August, and they'll be on the street in October. And then, as Janice said, we're certainly looking at early implementation for 2015 is optional, and they're January 1st, 2015, and they'd be required to be applied December 15th, 2015. So we want to leave some time for questions or comments. That's where ARSC is at. Again, I appreciate the input last year, and if there's any input we have this year, we're all ears. Thank you.
Before we go to questions, I have a couple of comments that I want to make. One is you do not have all of the slides in your information because ARSC met last Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So we didn't, by the time the presentation had to be in, we didn't know what the decisions of ARSC were going to be, and we didn't want to provide slides and then have to come and try to explain the differences. So we will be happy to provide those to you. I've had a number of discussions with practitioners, with bankers in Oklahoma, just discussing, trying to get comfortable with all of the ARSC's positions. And one of the things that's come to me over the last 3 or 4 months is that I think the market is going to continue to drive a compilation service. I think preparation will be very good for those clients that just need some help, or they really aren't, they don't know how to do certain things. They don't know how to do in a construction in progress. They don't know how to do their WIP. There's things that they may need assistance with. But I think when they take that statement to the banker that has on the bottom of it, no CPA provides any assurance, they're going to say, well, we want, what happened to the compilation that we've always gotten, or where's the report? So I think the market is going to continue to drive a compilation service. I do not think it's going to go away. As Chaz discussed with you, when we first started looking at, after we pulled the exposure draft last year and we started looking at, we tried to say, okay, let's start with a clean slate. Just wipe everything clean, let's start over. One of the big discussions was, let's do away with the term compilation. There's a lot of confusion about it. But it is so embedded in professional literature as well as in state boards, rules, and law that it would have required tremendous amounts of change. So we stepped back and said, we just don't think we can do that. But I still think compilations will be very viable, and I do not think they're going to go away. There is some reminders in the guidance. There will be that if you are in a preparation mode and you do enough, you're not independent, you've got to be careful on accepting any engagements from that client that would require independence. So the framework does address the code of ethics, which, as Chaz said, when we started looking at it, and we spent a lot of time on it, it was really, really clear that everything is in the code of professional ethics for what you should do when you do a preparation service. But this body, last year at regionals, we got loud and clear that 2 things we felt were very important. One was the independence issue. The other was the engagement letter being signed by both the client and the firm. So it is 10:30. Louise, do you want to allow questions or not? Chaz and I will be here. Chaz, you're going to be here all day?
Through lunch.
Chaz will be here through lunch. I'll be here through the conference. So we'll be happy to answer questions that any of you might have. It is 10:30, and I'll turn it back over to you, Jimmy.